On May the 7th of 2019, defendant Hannah Payne had the audacity to chase, corner, detain, assault, shoot, and kill an unarmed 62-year-old Kenneth Herring who was sitting in his own car. All because she didn't like his driving and she didn't like how he acted. This story begins with Kenneth Herring in his car driving along, and there's pretty much no doubt that he runs a red light in the area that we've all been talking about, near Forest Parkway and Riverdale Road. When he runs that red light, this defendant and another tractor trailer were coming toward that intersection. And Mr. Herring hits the trailer of the tractor trailer. This defendant sees it, and there's another witness who sees it, a correctional officer by the name of Terry Robinson. And everybody pulls off to the side to deal with the fact that there's just been a traffic accident. 911 is called to say, here we are, there's a traffic accident. Mr. Robinson calls 911, and so does the defendant. And there are the truck driver, the defendant, Terry Robinson, and Mr. Herring kind of hanging out on this scene. As it so happens, that just happened to be one of the worst traffic days in that area. 285 was shut down because a battery truck had caught on fire. So law enforcement is kind of blocking the entrance and exits for 285, and then there's another accident somewhere else in that area. So traffic is piled up, cars everywhere, no one can really get anywhere. And it's taking law enforcement a few moments to get to the scene. Well, the defendant didn't like that. She didn't like how long it was taking, and you'll hear that she called back. But you're also going to hear that Terry Robinson called. And he called because he had concerns for Mr. Herring. Mr. Herring appeared somewhat confused after the accident. Kept saying, "Who hit me? What's happening?" Things along those lines. And then started saying things like, "I didn't do anything wrong." Some confusion going on with Mr. Herring. And Mr. Robinson is going to tell you that not only is he a correctional officer, he's a correctional officer at a medical prison. And that he made some observations of Mr. Herring that led him to believe that it was a medical issue. He did not observe anything that made him believe that Mr. Herring had been drinking or that he was under the influence of anything. Just that he was having some sort of medical issue. And he would say that it was consistent with medical issues he's observed in the medical prison with people who are having issues with diabetes. And he will testify that he also observed needles in Mr. Herring's vehicle while they're hanging out on scene. And he will tell you that for those 20 or so minutes that everyone is on this scene, no problems. As far as no arguments, Mr. Herring says nothing to the defendant. He does nothing to the defendant. There's no hand gestures. You're number one in my book. I was talked about some in jury selection. None of that. Because Mr. Robinson knew it's best to keep everybody kind of separated and calm. So it's a pretty calm scene. And he will also tell you that there was extensive damage to Mr. Herring's vehicle. Stuff coming out the front, fluid leaking out of the bottom. It's not going to be running for long. He realized at some point, Mr. Robinson did, that Mr. Herring's kind of circling his vehicle. And they begin to think, he doesn't know what's going on. He might get in his car and drive somewhere. So that's why Mr. Robinson calls 911 a second time saying, listen, I asked y'all for an ambulance 20 minutes ago. Something's not okay here. Something's wrong with this gentleman. Where's the ambulance? And the defendant calls. Well, I called y'all 20 minutes ago. And then starts saying, I think he's going to leave the scene. And sure enough, Mr. Herring does get in his vehicle and begin driving. And the defendant, even though the first accident really didn't have very little to do with her, has the audacity to get in her vehicle and chase him. And while she's driving off, Mr. Robinson is basically saying, well, maybe you can get a picture of the tag or get the tag number. Maybe you can get that information. The defendant is narrating what she's doing to the 911 operator, who of course, tells the defendant, ma'am, don't chase him. That's not safe. Don't follow him. We don't need you to do that. But this defendant, as far as she was concerned, was the rightest person she knew. Because she tells that 911 operator, well, I'm not going to follow him. I don't know what he's going to do. I don't like how he's driving, basically. And follows him. And you're going to hear from witnesses who say they saw the defendant, ironically, driving very aggressively to try to chase down the person who had a traffic accident a few moments ago, or 20, 30 minutes earlier. Cutting people off, almost hitting people, jumping over a median to then block Mr. Herring in. You're not going to hear any evidence that she's law enforcement of any kind, has any authority to arrest him, write him any tickets, nothing. Just her authority comes solely from audacity. Blocks him in. And all of this is narrated on a 911 call. And you will hear the defendant screaming, "Get out of the car! Get out of the car!" And witnesses will tell you that she jumps out and is going straight to his driver's side. And one witness tell you she thought that she was hitting the window. But it turns out Mr. Herring's window was part of the way down. And that this defendant is reaching in to where Mr. Herring is sitting in the car, in the truck. A vehicle that she basically pulls over, even though number one, she was told not to. Number two, she had already given law enforcement his tag number. And number three, she knew that law enforcement was in the area. You'll hear that because she talks about it on the 911 call. And she knew that the car wasn't going to go very far. She says that on the 911 call. His car's smoking and stuff, so he's not going to get far. So she could have backed off and just let it be. Nope, not good enough. So she's jumping out screaming. And the witnesses will tell you that they observed her being the primary aggressor. The defendant reaching in and assaulting Mr. Herring. And that they never saw Mr. Herring do anything to the defendant. The most that anyone saw Mr. Herring do is kind of a get away from me. He doesn't know he doesn't know her. Kind of a get away. But they never saw him strangle her, hurt her, punch her, nothing. And nothing in his hands. Unarmed. But what happens is because Mr. Herring is trying to defend himself, he moves his vehicle, or either his vehicle goes into gear is already still in gear. Either his vehicle is still in gear, and while he's trying to deal with the defendant at his door, his car moves forward. And what happens is that he bumps into her Jeep. Her black and pink Jeep. And she's going to tell you, you're going to hear her say that that's why she shoots him. And once that happens, you'll hear an escalation in what she's saying. Get the fuck out of the car! Get the fuck out of the car! I will shoot you! I will shoot you! And that's what the witnesses heard. This is not something she's saying to herself in the privacy of her own vehicle for her own release. She's standing right up on Mr. Herring with a gun in her hand. The witnesses will tell you at some point while she's at the door, she takes a gun off her hip and is pointing that gun in the vehicle. She's the aggressor. That's what the witnesses are going to tell you. You'll hear all of this because she's still on the phone with 911. Phone's a little further away from the window because it's on the ground. Mr. Herring is trying his best not to get shot at this point. Still no weapon. Still trying to get the gun away from him, away from her, whatever. She's the only one with a weapon. So he is trying to defend himself. And after she shoots him, she picks up the phone with the 911 operator going, Ma'am, you are not supposed to follow him. She's going to tell you, the very first thing she says, he hit my car. That's what she says. You will hear her tell you in her own words why she killed this man. Then she tells the 911 operator, he pulled the trigger on my gun and shot himself. That's the level of audacity you're going to hear. Trying to claim this man would shoot himself. When we believe that the evidence will show through the witnesses, video, photographs will prove otherwise. We expect that you will hear that the law will tell you that doesn't matter to anybody. Because if she's the primary aggressor, Mr. Herring can defend himself. But he still never has a weapon, gets out of the car, or does anything. Other than, as you will see, hands up. Maybe trying to get her out of his window. Law enforcement is in the area. In fact, she's still basically on the phone with 911 when they get there. Because, as I just told you, there's a lot of traffic in the area. Cars can't really go anywhere. Nobody's going anywhere fast. So there are other drivers who watch this happen. There are people who are behind the defendant, behind Mr. Herring's car, beside Mr. Herring's car. There are witnesses who watch it. And one of them runs to where he can see that the police are blocking the interstate and comes down there and says, she just shot somebody. Somebody just got shot. Please come down here. And law enforcement gets there. And as soon as they arrive, they ask, who shot? And the defendant says, I did. And is allowed to politely hand over her gun to a police officer. And you'll see some additional audacity of kind of arguing with the witnesses on scene before she's taken into custody on that scene. You're going to hear from several of those eyewitnesses who were in that traffic area, who will tell you who they saw armed, who they saw being aggressive, who they saw being violent. And that it was never at any moment, Kenneth Herring. You'll be able to hear the defendant's own demeanor afterward, because for some bit of time she's still talking to 911. And you'll hear her say, well, I'm okay, or I'm safe, but he ain't. Now he needs paramedics. You'll be able to see after one of the witnesses, who happens to be driving by, pulls out his cell phone and videos what portion of it that he could capture. And so not only will you hear her demeanor, her audacity, what we contend will be her malice, you'll be able to see some of it. You'll see what happens. She picks up her phone, tells them he needs paramedics, and just walks off. Walks off to her car. During this incident at the door, there's a tear to her shirt, so she puts on another shirt, hangs out till law enforcement gets there. You'll hear that there's documentation in the vehicle consistent with Mr. Herring being on insulin. You're going to see that there's needles in the car. His sister is going to tell you that he was an insulin-dependent diabetic. You're going to hear from the medical examiner, who will tell you that this gunshot was the cause of his death, and that all of his toxicology screens were negative. He was not drinking, he was not on drugs, nothing. But we expect that you'll hear some further audacity today regarding trying to say some bad things about Mr. Herring. We expect that you'll hear some claims that Mr. Herring was the aggressor, despite the fact that he was chased down and cornered and unarmed. That you'll hear a request to consider self-defense with this defendant, despite the fact that we expect the evidence will show that she's not defending herself. She's the aggressor. And anything Mr. Herring did would be to try to save his own life, even though he failed. You're also going to hear some scientific evidence. We're just trying to make sure that you have all of the evidence that we have that we can present to you. They attempted to get fingerprints off the gun. You'll see the gun. They weren't able to do so. There are some prints, but they didn't have anything sufficient to match it to. So no match up to any of the prints they believe that they can find on the slide of the gun. You gotta have a big enough surface to leave a fingerprint. So the slide of the gun is what they did. No match. They then swabbed the gun to see, let's see what the DNA is. And the only DNA that they can match to any one person is the defendant's own DNA is on the slide of that gun. Not a shocker, it's her gun. There were at least 3 DNA profiles on the gun. We know one is male, and that's all we know. One's the defendant, 2 additional, 1 is male, and that they could not match the male DNA to Mr. Herring. They couldn't create a match to the other 2 profiles. So we're just going to make sure you know that there's going to be some scientific evidence that's coming your way, just to make sure that you have the full picture. You're going to hear multiple 911 calls, 2 from Terry Robinson, 2 from the defendant, and 1 from one of the eyewitnesses. You'll see multiple photographs, body-worn camera of the initial responding officer, to just kind of, when you see kind of the chaos of the scene, how the vehicles are parked, all of those things. Okay, so I know this is, as we talked about when we were talking about in jury selection some, we thought we were going to be putting up witnesses yesterday. So we have our exhibits numbered well in advance. So I promise you're going to think when we start telling you what exhibit we're tendering that we can't count. I promise that we can. We're just going to have to go in the order that we have to go in, because I've told you there are some professional witnesses, there are some out-of-state witnesses, and we thought we were going to put those people up yesterday. So we start out with, we're going to start with number 1. But if we end up jumping to number 12, we promise we can count. So just kind of bear with us, and then we have to go in the order now that we have to go in. That may not seem as smooth, but just to ensure that we are able to get all of these witnesses to appear before you so that you can hear the full story of what happened to Kenneth Herring on May the 7th of 2019. So we appreciate your attention on behalf of Mr. Herring's family. We appreciate your patience, your attention. And at the end of this trial, ADA Nigel Hunter is going to come before you and talk to you about the audacity that you've heard, about the malice that you are going to hear, about the felonies that were committed by this defendant with no justification whatsoever. And she will request that you speak the only verdict that tells the truth about what happened to Kenneth Herring on May the 7th of 2019. And that is that this defendant is guilty of malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime. Thank you.